She's the Emmy Award-winning star of stage and screen, while most around the world will remember Sally Struthers as Gloria in the classic sitcom All in the Family.
For years, America laughed at the fights in that tiny Queen's living room, but the real story was happening just outside the camera's frame. Sally Struthers spent the most defining years of her life working with Rob Reiner, carrying pressures no audience ever saw. She stayed silent about it for decades. Now she's finally breaking that silence.
When All in the Family went on the air after we had 8 in the can, and it started in the next few weeks to climb to #1, we were all feeling our oats, and I went.
And what she reveals about working with him hits far deeper than anyone expects. How Sally and Rob landed the roles that changed their lives. All in the Family did not look like a safe show when it first went on the air. It ran on the CBS network through most of the 1970s, based on a British comedy called Till Death Us Do Part, and it followed a working-class family in Queens in New York. The father, Archie Bunker, worked with his hands, spoke his mind, and had loud opinions about almost everything.
The dent in his car is hardly cold, and he's coming over here to claim his pound of fish.
His wife, Edith, tried to keep peace. Their daughter, Gloria, and her husband, Mike, moved into the house and turned dinner into arguments that sounded a lot like real life.
No arguments, okay?
Who's arguing?
I don't think that's an answer.
Oh, this dingbat's gonna start argument #1.
The series was built by producer Norman Lear and his partner Bud Yorkin, and it pushed American television into places it had avoided for years. Instead of gentle jokes and neat endings, episodes walked into subjects like racism, anti-Semitism, women's rights, the Vietnam War, abortion, miscarriages, sexual assault, religion, breast cancer, divorce, and impotence. The writers used comedy, but the laughs came with a sting, because the things Archie said on that couch were the same things many people were hearing at their own kitchen tables. The show ran for 9 seasons and more than 200 episodes, and for several of those years, it sat at the very top of the ratings. At the center of that house were 4 faces viewers came to know well. Carol O'Connor played Archie. Jean Stapleton played Edith. Sally Struthers played their daughter Gloria, who grew from a young wife into a woman with her own views. Rob Reiner played Mike, the college-educated son-in-law who did not hold back when he thought Archie was wrong. Week after week, millions of people watched these 4 stand in the living room or at the table and throw ideas at one another.
I'm sick and tired of your Polish jokes.
Oh, you see, Mom, it's winding up in an argument after all.
With Gloria often stuck between her father and her husband. For Sally Struthers and Rob Reiner, that living room was not just a set. It was the place that tied their names together for the rest of their lives. Before the show, there was no reason to think that a young woman from Portland, Oregon, and the son of a famous comedy writer would end up playing one of the most talked-about couples on television. To see what it was like for Sally to work with Rob, it helps to know who they both were before they ever walked through Archie's front door. Sally Ann Struthers was born in Portland in the summer of 1947. Her father was a surgeon. Her mother came from a Norwegian family and worked for a power company. When Sally was still a child, her father left, and her mother raised her and her sister on her own. Sally has said that she grew up in a calm, religious home where she did not hear racial slurs or hateful epithets. Acting gave her a way to stand out.
Stop it. There isn't a major city in this country where the drinking water isn't below safe standards.
In school, she took the lead in plays. She finished high school in the mid-1960s and decided that acting was not going to stay a hobby. She left Oregon and moved to Los Angeles, where she enrolled at the Pasadena Playhouse College of Theater Arts. The school was known for strict training, and Sally learned how to use her voice and her body so that people in the back row could feel what a character was going through. Once she left the Playhouse, she met the hard side of the business. She worked in commercials and landed small roles in films like The Finks and 5 Easy Pieces, where she shared scenes with established stars but had only a few lines. She also had a supporting role in the thriller The Getaway. Many of these jobs could have gone to any young woman with blonde hair and energy. They kept her working, but they did not give her much say in how a story was told.
My name's Shirley, but they call me Betty, and her name's Twinkie.
Twinkie?
Yes.
One variety show changed everything. In the late 1960s, she was hired as a dancer on the Struthers Brothers Comedy Hour, a sketch and music show that mixed jokes with political jabs. While Sally was dancing in the background, Norman Lear noticed her. He saw the spark she had and remembered her. That quiet moment is what later put her in the running to play Gloria. Even with that lucky break, Sally did not feel secure. She did not have family in show business, and nothing in Hollywood felt guaranteed. By the time All in the Family was coming together, she was still waiting for a part that would let her be more than a background presence. Rob Reiner's path to that same soundstage began on the other side of the country. He was born in the Bronx in the spring of 1947, the oldest child of Carl and Estelle Reiner. Carl was a working comic who would soon create The Dick Van Dyke Show. So, from the start, Rob's home life was wrapped up in writing rooms and late-night work. When Rob was still young, the family moved to Los Angeles so Carl could keep building his television career.
I understand that Hughes is a reporter. Look, boy, we don't like reporters.
Rob later said that he grew up watching his father rehearse scenes and shape scripts, which meant he learned how television worked before he ever had a serious job of his own. As a teenager, he went to Beverly Hills High School, where many students had some tie to the film or television world. Rob did not walk straight into stardom, though. In the late 1960s, he joined the staff of the Struthers Brothers Comedy Hour as one of the youngest writers. He worked beside people like Steve Martin and learned how to blend jokes with real political points. He also took small acting roles on television and in film. When Norman Lear started shaping what would become All in the Family, Rob was in the right place and had the right skills. He understood how to argue on camera, and he cared about politics. But the role of Mike Stivic still carried a special kind of risk.
Right lie.
You know something, Archie? Just because a guy is sensitive and he's an intellectual and he wears glasses, you make him out a queer.
Mike was written as the outspoken young man who challenged Archie on issues like racism and the war. Taking that role meant that if the show worked, a big part of the country would see Rob as the face of a new, loud generation. The show itself had to fight its way onto the air. Lear first tested the idea at ABC, where he and Yorkin shot a pilot called Justice for All, with Carol O'Connor and Gene Stapleton as the parents, and Kelly Jean Peters and Tim McIntyre as their daughter and son-in-law. A second pilot, Those Were the Days, kept the parents but recast Gloria with Candace Azara and changed her husband's name. Both pilots showed the same basic idea: a stubborn father, a patient mother, and a younger couple who pushed back. The network liked pieces of it but worried about the sharp language and open fights. For a while, it looked like the project might stall. CBS finally agreed to take a chance. When Lear prepared the version that would air, he decided to search again for Gloria. Candace Azara, who had played her in the second pilot, was out. Penny Marshall, who was in a relationship with Rob Reiner at the time and who looked a bit like Gene Stapleton, was high on the list. Sally later said she assumed Penny would be chosen, simply because she seemed to fit the family picture. Instead, the part went to Sally. Lear had not forgotten the young woman he saw dancing on the Struthers Brothers Comedy Hour. When she read for Gloria, he saw that she could match Carol O'Connor's force and still keep warmth in her eyes. He has said he also thought she looked enough like him for viewers to believe she was Archie's daughter. Sally later joked that being told she resembled a middle-aged man was a strange compliment, but she knew how big the opportunity was. For Rob, being cast as Mike was just as important. It was his largest television role so far, and it put him side by side with Carol O'Connor in almost every episode. It looked like a gift, but it also meant that viewers would tie his own face to every speech Mike made about war, race, and women's rights. If the public hated Mike, they would likely aim that anger at Rob himself. When CBS ordered a full run, Sally and Rob walked onto a soundstage at Television City in Hollywood and stepped into a space that millions of people would soon recognize. The bunker living room had Archie's worn chair, the small dining table, and the narrow staircase Gloria and Mike used when they came down for breakfast. By the time the show took off, Sally and Rob were locked together in that Queen's house several days a week, saying words other people had written and bringing their own fears and instincts to every argument. They were both born in 1947, both in their their 20s and both still figuring out who they were, yet they had been handed a marriage that millions of strangers felt entitled to judge. Once All in the Family became a true hit, the question for Sally and Rob was no longer whether the show would survive. The question was whether they could carry the emotional and professional load that came with it week after week, while the country argued along with them. The truth about Sally and Rob's life behind the scenes. A normal week on that show did not start with costumes or cameras. It started with everyone at a long table, scripts in hand, reading the whole story out loud while the writers, producers, and network people listened and took notes. After that first read-through, they spent several days blocking scenes on the same living room set, running the arguments again and again, then finished the week by playing it all in front of a live studio audience that laughed, gasped, or went quiet right in their faces. It felt less like a loose half-hour comedy and more like doing the same sharp political stage play over and over while 4 cameras tried to keep up. That live audience changed everything. On most shows, actors trust that an editor will fix the timing later. Here, the timing was decided in the room. If a joke hit hard, they had to freeze and let the laugh roll through. If a harsh line about race or gender landed with a strange hush, they felt that too, with no chance to soften it later. Standards and practices people sat in during those first readings, counting how many times Archie swore or used a touchy phrase, and they would literally bargain with Norman Lear over which words had to go and which ones could stay. Sally has said there were arguments over something as small as how many times Archie could say, "Geez," because the network felt that was too close to taking the Lord's name in vain. For Sally, that rehearsal hall was a shock on a whole different level. She came out of a soft, church-going home in Portland where she never heard slurs at the dinner table, and suddenly she was sitting there while Carol O'Connor read lines that used them out loud. Often something ugly would come out in Archie's voice, and she would quietly turn to the person next to her and ask, "What does that mean?" She was not pretending. She honestly did not know. She later said that in those early years, the main lesson was simply learning that this kind of language even existed in the world, and that a lot of viewers at home heard it every day. At the same time, she was dealing with a very different problem that had nothing to do with the audience or the censors. The writer's room was full of older men who understood Archie, Edith, and Mike down to the bone, but did not really know what to do with a young woman like Gloria. Sally has said that most weeks she opened her script and saw the same tiny set of lines in slightly different order. She would ask, half joking and half hurt, if there was a stamp somewhere that just said, "I will help you set the table, Ma," "Michael, where are you going?" and "Oh, Daddy, stop it," because that seemed to be all she ever got. Those table reads could be painful. Everyone would go around the cast, line after line, and she would sit there waiting for her turn. If one of her 3 little lines got cut in front of the room, she has said she felt her whole body sink into the chair. The show made her famous and gave her 2 Emmy Awards, but inside that room she often felt like the 4th banana, watching the 3 older leads carry the story while she tried to stay visible at all. After about 5 seasons, the strain got so strong that she tried to leave. She went into a formal legal process called arbitration, where a neutral lawyer hears both sides of a contract fight. Sally has said she spent around $40,000 on that fight, money she did not really have, trying to break free and find other work. She lost. The ruling forced her back to the show, and she returned knowing 2 facts at once. This job had changed her life, and this job also hurt. That mix is the weight she was carrying when she now talks about what it felt like to work beside Rob Reiner every week. Rob handled those same weeks in a very different way. At that long table, he was not just waiting for his turn to speak. People who were there say he turned the pages like a script doctor. He would jump in with very quick, almost technical notes, go to page 5, bottom line, then point to a spot and say a joke needed to move, a beat needed to change, or a line could be cut. He was especially focused on how things would play once the audience was sitting there. Over time, people realized he was almost always right about where a laugh would come, where a gasp would land, and where a moment needed more space. Sally has described him as a kind of machine in those moments, but not in a cold way. It was more like his brain could see 10 steps ahead. He was not just protecting his own speeches. He would sometimes suggest cutting one of his lines if it made the scene tighter, or if it allowed a look from someone else to land harder. That habit made the work between them very specific.
We have a good lunch. Is there a good break that I can lie down? That's my method. No, I don't know.
When they stood in that cramped living room set and argued as Mike and Gloria, he treated her reactions as part of the timing. A sigh, A shocked stare or a small crack in her voice were beats he counted.
Yet in the rehearsal hall, he didn't ever refer to me as Sally or even Gloria. He called me the girl.
The same way he counted punchlines. None of that fixed the fact that she still had fewer lines on the page than the others. She has been very clear that he did not run the writer's room and did not control who got what story. What he did control was how the scenes felt once the cameras rolled, and in that space he showed her that Gloria was not just extra furniture. When Mike shouted at Archie, someone had to stand in the middle and show the cost on her face, and Rob took that seriously. He could have blasted straight through his speeches and left her behind, but he did not. The biggest shift between them came on a day when her frustration finally spilled over. Sally has told the story of sitting there looking at yet another script where she had almost nothing to say and breaking down in front of Rob. She complained that she was barely in the show, that she would never grow as an actor if this kept up, that it felt like she did not matter. Instead of telling her to calm down, he gave her a line she never forgot. He told her that if she could somehow learn to make the whole show more important than her own role, one day she would find herself offering to give away some of her lines. At first, that sounded almost cruel. How was she supposed to give away lines when she barely had any? But he explained that the real power was in the episode working. If a moment would land better in Archie's mouth, let him have it. If an extra joke would throw off a serious beat, let it go. He was not asking her to be small. He was asking her to think like the whole cast, not like someone keeping score. Over time, she says that advice settled into her bones. There were later scripts where she really did look at a line and say, "Let Jean take that, it fits her better," because she was now watching the story as one big thing instead of counting how many times Gloria spoke. That shift made it a little easier to carry the emotional load the show demanded. While the show was on the air, Rob picked up 2 Emmy Awards and several other nominations for his work as Mike.
About why they should make the movie, and it's going to be successful. It's about rock and roll. The kids will like it. They'll watch it. There'll be repeat business. I'm going crazy.
At the same time, the nickname Archie used on him, Meathead, stuck to his real life like glue. He has joked that he could win a Nobel Prize and people would still walk up and yell that name at him on the street. That actually happened. He would be out at a restaurant or walking down a sidewalk and hear strangers shout "Meathead" across the room like they were greeting a friend, without caring that they were yelling at a real person and not a made-up son-in-law from Queens. Sally saw the flip side of that from her own angle. When she went out with her then-husband, psychiatrist Bill Rader, fans sometimes came up and asked where Michael was, because they truly thought she was married to Rob in real life. She has told stories of having to smile and explain that her on-screen husband and her off-screen husband were not the same man, and that Gloria and Mike's fights did not follow them home at night. People were so locked into the couple on television that they had trouble believing anything outside that living room was real. Sally and Rob were very close during those years, but not in a romantic way. She has been very clear that they were partners in the scenes, not lovers behind the scenes.
Actually, I worked with him. It came out maybe in '71, but we made the film in 1969.
They spent countless hours side by side at that kitchen table set. They trusted each other with sharp dialogue and vulnerable moments, and every so often he would call her on the phone without even bothering with a greeting, jumping straight into a joke or an idea he wanted to try. To her, that was proof of how his mind worked. He lived inside the show even when he was off the clock, always thinking about a better line, a sharper beat, a cleaner way to play a moment. By the time the seasons moved on and that famous living room had hosted more arguments than anyone could count, the rhythm between them was set. Rob was already starting to look past being in front of the camera and think about what stories looked like from behind it. Sally was trying to figure out what, if anything, waited for her once Gloria stopped walking through that front door. That quiet shift is where their paths began to pull apart. What happened after All in the Family? Not long after the show ended, Sally was asked to carry Gloria into a new series built around her alone. In the spin-off, simply called Gloria, she plays a single mother in a small New York town, working in a veterinary clinic and raising her son after the marriage breaks apart.
Let me tell you, there's no greater gift than a pet. For the right person, that is. Caring for a dog or cat is a daily responsibility.
The show lasted only one season and never matched the original. For Rob, the break from Mike Stivic came with a move to the other side of the camera. His first feature as a director was This Is Spinal Tap in the mid-1980s, a fake rock documentary that looked so real, many people thought it was about an actual band. It was not a huge hit at first, but over time it turned into a cult favorite and a common reference for anyone who loves rock music or dry, straight-faced comedy. Over roughly a decade, he directed films like Stand By Me, The Princess Bride, When Harry Met Sally, Misery, A Few Good Men, and The American President. They jump from coming-of-age story to love story to thriller to courtroom drama. But they share clear characters and simple emotional beats that people still quote. During those same years, he also used his fame to back marriage rights for same couples in California and to support a tobacco tax that paid for early childhood programs. By then, he was one of the most trusted directors in Hollywood. The stories from his sets back that up. The young cast of Stand By Me have talked for years about how he handled them.
Hey, you guys. I bet you anything that if we find him, we'll get our pictures in the paper.
Jerry O'Connell has said that he thinks of Rob as a parent figure, not just a boss, and that he learned how a good director should treat young actors by watching him. He tells a story about being 11 years old, clowning around in character after a scene and bracing for a lecture. Instead, Rob told him to keep going and push the moment farther. That kind of trust made those kids feel safe enough to give performances that still sting when people watch the film now. Rob also stepped into public fights outside the studio. He spoke often about gun laws and national politics, becoming a loud critic of Donald Trump. For people who only knew him as Meathead, it looked like the character had stepped into real life. For people who watched his work closely, it was the same serious, engaged person Sally remembered from her years sitting across the living room from him. In late 2025, Rob and his wife Michelle were killed in a violent attack at their home in Los Angeles.
Surrounding the horrific murder of Rob Reiner and his wife Michelle. The breaking news.
Their son was arrested and charged. Actors, writers, and even former presidents lined up to say that he had changed their lives, not just with films, but with the way he treated people and the way he used his name to push for causes he believed in. Groups that fight for gay rights and for children's health called out his years of steady work behind the scenes. Sally's road looked very different. After the Gloria spin-off ended, she kept working, but the parts were smaller and the payoffs were quieter. She spent years in theater, doing musicals and plays in regional houses and on tour, living out of suitcases while doing 8 shows a week. Television called again when she was cast as Babette, the fast-talking neighbor on Gilmore Girls, a tiny woman paired with a much taller husband. She has said that fans still stop her to talk about Babette, the raspy-voiced neighbor who always seems to know the latest gossip in town. At the same time, Sally became a familiar face in a very different setting. For many years, she did commercials asking viewers to sponsor children through groups like Christian Children's Fund and Save the Children, speaking about hunger and illness. Those ads ran so often that they turned into a late-night punchline, and comedians mocked her weight and her tears. She later said she did not find those jokes funny because she had spent years traveling and talking with families and children in real need, and she took that work very seriously. Sally's words after Rob's death were raw. In statements she gave to the press,
Now, the Hollywood director Rob Reiner and his wife Michelle had been found dead at their home in Los Angeles.
She said the news was beyond devastating, and that there were no words big enough for it. She tied her grief to the years they spent together on that Queen set, building a couple that millions of people watched argue, make up, and grow. She did not talk about awards or ratings. She talked about time shared, work done, and the strange bond that forms when two actors build the same marriage over and over again in front of strangers. There was also a quiet full-circle moment not long before the tragedy. In early 2024, the delayed Emmy Awards held a tribute for Norman Lear, who had died the year before. On that stage, Rob and Sally stood side by side again, speaking about the man who had changed both of their lives. They were older now, but the sight of Mike and Gloria standing next to each other again hit viewers who had grown up with them. For a few minutes, the long years of separate careers fell away, and it was just two former scene partners sharing the spotlight one more time. Thanks for watching. Now check out the videos popping up on screen for more unbelievable stories.